The massive aircraft hangar is wide open, flooded with blinding, high-pressure lights. A billionaire CEO strides across the concrete, her face a mask of cold fury. Before her, a single dad mechanic leans over a massive jet engine. A heated argument erupts, the air crackling with tension. Suddenly, the CEO grabs his collar, pulling him close in front of the entire crew. She yells, half mocking, half challenging, "Kiss me 5 minutes, or admit you're wrong and quit." Phones go up, cameras rolling. The crowd laughs. The mechanic stands perfectly still. No one knows this is a test, and those 5 minutes will flip the world upside down. His name is Mark Jensen, 44 years old, a man whose hands are permanently stained with oil and whose heart belongs entirely to his 8-year-old daughter, Lena. Every morning, long before the sun touches the tarmac, Mark is in their cramped apartment, carefully packing Lena's lunch with the precision of a master engineer. He cuts the sandwiches into perfect triangles, just the way she likes them, while the hum of the old refrigerator serves as the soundtrack to his quiet life. He watches her sleep for a moment, her small chest rising and falling in a rhythm he spent years studying to ensure it never stopped. The air in their home always smells faintly of lavender and engine degreaser, a strange mix that defines Mark's dual existence. He is a man of two worlds. In one, he is a tender father who knows exactly which stuffed animal Lena needs when she has a nightmare. In the other, he is a ghost in the hangar, a contract worker who speaks the language of titanium and high-octane fuel. The silence of the early morning is his sanctuary, a time when the only thing he has to fight is the stubbornness of a bolt or the viscosity of a fluid. He knows the Caldwell 7 better than the people who designed it. He knows its groans, its whistles, and the way it shivers when the temperature drops. Mark is a contract mechanic at Caldwell Aero, a man who works the shifts no one else wants. To the hotshot engineers with their fancy degrees and starched shirts, he is just a guy with a wrench, a relic of a time before everything was automated by AI. They see the grease under his nails, but they don't see the scars on his soul. Every day, as the sky turns purple over the runway, Lena waits for him in a tiny, windowless office near the security gate, clutching her colored pencils and drawing superplanes with pink wings, waiting for her hero to finish his shift. But nobody in the hangar knows who Mark Jensen really was. 10 years ago, he was the lead engineer for the Global Aviation Safety Board, the man who literally wrote the engine reliability Bible used by every major airline in the world. He was the golden boy of the industry, a genius who could find a fracture in a turbine blade just by the way the wind whistled through the intake. But then came the prototype crash, a flight he helped design, a flight that took the life of his wife. He didn't just leave the industry, he burned his bridges and vanished. He chose the life of a grease monkey, a man who works at the bottom of the food chain, because the view from the top was too painful to bear. He traded his 6-figure salary in the corner office for the ability to be home every single night to read Lena a bedtime story. Renee Caldwell is his polar opposite. At 39, she is the CEO of Caldwell Aero, a woman who moves at the speed of a jet turbine. She is sharp, cold, and driven by a legacy that is currently crumbling under the weight of a changing market. She has spent her life trying to outrun the shadow of her father's brilliance. And today, that shadow is threatening to swallow her whole. Today is the day of the Aero Nexus merger, a $10 billion deal that will either save her family's company or finish it forever. She has been awake for 48 hours, fueled by caffeine and the desperate, clawing need to prove her father's critics wrong. The flagship jet, the Caldwell 7, is parked in Hangar 4. It is a masterpiece of carbon fiber and titanium, a vessel that represents every cent the company has left. It is the only thing standing between Renee and total bankruptcy. But as the engines begin their final warm-up sequence, a low, guttural vibration vibrates through the concrete floor. Mark Jensen, standing at the edge of the intake with his eyes closed, suddenly holds up a hand, Stop the sequence, Mark says, his voice low, cutting through the roar like a blade. The resonance in the second stage is off by 0.04 hertz. We need to hold the flight for 5 minutes. I need to verify the secondary sensor threshold. The hangar erupts in whispers. The lead engineering team, led by a man named Marcus who hasn't touched a tool in 5 years, looks at Mark with pure contempt. The dashboard is green, Renee, Marcus says, gesturing to his tablet. The diagnostics show a 99.8% stability rating. Jensen is just a contract grunt trying to feel important. He's wasting our window and our money. If we miss this slot, the deal is dead. Renee's heels click sharply on the concrete as she marches toward Mark. To her, he is just a line item in a budget, an obstacle standing in the way of her survival. She sees his worn, oil-cracked boots, his calloused hands, and the stubborn set of his jaw. "We don't have 5 minutes, Mark," she says, her voice vibrating with a cold, exhausted fury. "We have the future of 10,000 employees on the line. Every second we sit here, the market is bleeding. Move aside." Mark doesn't move. He stands his ground, not with the arrogance of a CEO, but with the terrifyingly calm sense of a man who has seen what happens when you ignore the metal's voice. If that plane leaves now, you're gambling with lives, not just stock prices. Give me 5 minutes to confirm the feedback loop, or I won't sign the safety release. And without my signature, insurance won't cover the flight. Renee steps into Mark's personal space, so close that the scent of her expensive, sharp perfume clashes violently with the heavy smell of jet fuel and sweat. Her eyes are bloodshot, her adrenaline spiked by the ticking clock on the hangar wall. She can see her own reflection in the dark safety glasses tucked into his pocket. The air in the hangar feels like it has been sucked out by a vacuum, leaving only the static charge of 100 judgmental eyes. "You're so sure of yourself, aren't you, Mark?" she says, her voice rising to a pitch that echoes off the corrugated metal ceiling. "You want to play the hero? You want to hold up a $10 billion merger for a feeling in your ears? You think your intuition is better than $20 million worth of computer sensors?" Mark doesn't blink. He doesn't look at the cameras that are now being held up by the junior staff. He looks at the faces of the junior mechanics, boys who see him as an old-timer whose best days were behind him. He feels the phantom weight of the medals he no longer wears, the heavy gold of the safety board awards that were now gathering dust in a box under his bed. "I don't play hero, Miss Caldwell. Heroes are for movies and medals. I take responsibility. That's what a mechanic does. That's what keeps the sky from falling." Marcus and a few of the junior managers let out a derisive snort. "Responsibility? You're a contractor, Jensen. Your only responsibility is to do what the engineers tell you," Marcus sneers, playing to the crowd of onlookers. He's just trying to make a scene because he knows the merger might mean his contract isn't renewed. He's looking for a payout. Renee, pushed to the absolute edge by the sleep deprivation and the crushing weight of the merger, does something that shocks even herself. She reaches out and grabs Mark's collar, her fingers twisting the rough, oil-stained fabric of his jumpsuit. She pulls him close, forcing him to stand straight, forcing him to look into the eyes of a woman who is drowning in her own ambition. Her grip on his collar is tight, her knuckles white, a physical manifestation of her own fragility. "I'll tell you what, Mark," she yells, her voice dripping with a cruel, desperate sarcasm that masks her own fear. "Since you love wasting my time, let's make it official. Let's make it a performance. Since you're so certain of your expertise, let's see how much you're willing to bet. If you're so certain, if your intuition is so valuable, then kiss me. Right here, in front of the cameras, for 5 minutes. A public display of your arrogance. If you're wrong about the engine, you're fired. I'll sue you for every penny you have for breach of contract, and I'll make sure you never touch a wrench in this industry again. But if you're right, well, we'll see." The hangar goes dead silent. The sound of a dropped wrench in the distance echoes like a gunshot. The cameras are recording everything, every board member, every technician, Every security guard is watching the billionaire CEO challenge the nobody mechanic to a public display of humiliation. It is a joke meant to break him, a way to show him that his time is worth nothing compared to hers. Renee's own heart is hammering against her ribs. She doesn't want to kiss him. She wants him to step aside. She wants him to disappear so she can go back to being in control. Mark feels the heat of the hangar lights on the back of his neck. He feels the weight of the crowd's laughter, a low, ugly sound that spreads like a virus. He looks down at the small, manicured hand gripping his collar. Then he looks at Renee. He doesn't look embarrassed. He doesn't look angry. He looks at her with a profound, heartbreaking disappointment. It's the look of a man who realized the person he respected is actually quite small. He slowly reaches up, his large, grease-blackened hand moving toward her face. The crowd gasps, thinking he's actually going to do it, but instead, he gently, firmly, moves her hand away from his neck. "I don't accept humiliation as a currency, Ms. Caldwell," he says, his voice clear and resonant, echoing through the silence like a church bell. "And I don't treat the safety of an aircraft as a game for your amusement. You want to see me crawl? You're looking at the wrong man. I've seen better people than you fall from higher places because they forgot what was important." The crowd gasps again. Renee's face flushes a deep, angry red, followed quickly by a wave of unexpected shame. She had expected him to wither or to grab the money and the fame. She hadn't expected him to protect his dignity with such quiet, crushing force. Mark continues, his voice dropping to a whisper that only she can hear. "But I will take your 5 minutes, not for a kiss, not for a joke, for the truth. Give me 5 minutes of silence, and I'll show you exactly why this plane is currently a coffin with wings. If I'm wrong, I'll walk away and you'll never see me again." Renee is caught in her own trap. She can't back down now without looking weak in front of the board. She looks at the massive digital clock on the hangar wall. 5 minutes, Mark," she says, her voice trembling as she tries to regain her composure. "If that engine is green when the timer hits 0, you walk out of here and never come back. And I will make sure the industry knows your name as a fraud." Mark Jensen does not rush. He doesn't look at the cameras. He doesn't care about the billions of dollars at stake. He moves with a rhythmic, mechanical grace that can only be forged over decades of knowing the soul of an aircraft. He first requests a safety perimeter. "Everyone back 10 feet, he orders, his voice a calm command that even the security guards obey. He doesn't need a diagnostic tablet. He doesn't need a laptop. He walks to the secondary intake of the port turbine. He doesn't start dismantling the engine. That would take hours. Instead, he pulls a small, handheld acoustic sensor from his pocket, a tool he's kept since his days at the safety board. He places it against the titanium housing and closes his eyes. He isn't looking at data. He is listening to the heartbeat of the metal. He is looking for a ghost in the machine. "I need a load simulation," Mark says, his voice steady as a rock. "Run the auxiliary power unit to 80% now." Marcus, the lead engineer, steps forward, his face twisted in a sneer. "That's unnecessary. The APU pre-flight check already cleared. You're just stalling, Jensen. You're trying to win the clock. Renee, this is costing us the departure slot." "Do it," Renee snaps, her eyes never leaving Mark's hands. She notices they aren't shaking, not even a fraction. The whining of the APU reached a frequency that set the teeth of every person in the hangar on edge, a piercing, metallic scream that seemed to demand an answer. Mark's eyes remain closed, his mind mapping the flow of electrons and the movement of high-speed fuel pumps. As the turbines begin to whine, rising to a high-pitched, haunting scream that vibrates in the teeth of everyone present. Mark moves the sensor an inch to the left, then an inch to the right. He finds the spot. He isn't looking for a broken part. He is looking for a lag in the feedback loop. He discovers it. A small, almost microscopic delay in the signal response of a secondary pressure sensor. It's an intermittent fault. It doesn't stay red long enough to trigger the modern, optimized dashboard, but it's there, hidden in the resonance of the cooling cycle. Marcus's face was a mask of arrogance, A man who had forgotten that a tablet can only show you what it's programmed to see. Mark turns to the crowd, pointing to a small, unshielded wire deep within the housing that seemed perfectly normal to the naked eye. There is signal interference, he explains, his voice carrying across the silent hangar. The new Gen 7 avionics suite is drawing too much power from the same bus as this sensor. In a hangar, at low power, it seems fine, but when you hit takeoff thrust, the sensor will lag. The computer will think the engine has failed, and it will automatically trigger the fire suppression system mid-air. You won't have an engine fire, but the computer will kill the engine anyway because it can't distinguish between a real fire and a signal delay. Renee steps forward, her voice tense and hushed. You can prove this? Or is this just more of your old-school paranoia? I'll do you one better, Mark says. We'll run the simulation on the cockpit monitors. I've bridged the diagnostic port. Watch the response time on the AB circuit. It's supposed to be instantaneous. He keys in a sequence on the cockpit's external terminal. The crowd watches the massive screens hanging from the hangar ceiling. 2 lines appear, one blue, one red. For 4 minutes, they move in perfect sync. The engineers start to smirk. Marcus crosses his arms. See? It's perfect, Marcus whispers, loud enough for the board to hear. Jensen is just a has-been looking for a headline. But then, when the clock hits the 4-minute and 45-second mark, the red line jumps. It stutters for a fraction of a second, then flatlines. A massive, flashing, critical failure, signal lag warning appears on the screen in bright, blood-red letters. The flickering of lights and the sudden drop in the system pressure sent a ripple of panic through the engineers. The hangar goes dead silent. The smirks vanish. Marcus turns a sickly shade of gray. If that jet had been at 10,000 feet, that stutter would have caused a total engine shutdown in a fly-by-wire system. The aircraft would have dropped like a stone. The billion-dollar merger would have ended in a fireball. Mark doesn't gloat. He doesn't look at Renee with a told-you-so expression. He doesn't even look at Marcus. He simply reaches into the engine access panel, and with a single, high-speed calibration screw, he adjusts the sensor to a setting used in the 2014 safety models, a setting that modern engineers had optimized away to save a few milliseconds of boot-up time. Calibrated, Mark says, his voice echoing in the stillness. The system is stable now. You can check the feedback loop. Renee looks at the screens. The lines are now moving in perfect, flawless harmony. The green system-ready light finally glows with a truth it didn't have 5 minutes ago. The clock hits 0. Renee stands frozen. She looks at the man she just tried to humiliate. She looks at the grease on his face, the calm in his eyes, and the absolute, unshakable dignity of his posture. She realizes that she didn't just almost lose a deal, she almost lost her soul to the altar of efficiency. The cameras are still rolling, but the people holding them are lowering their phones in shame. The joke is over, and the real hero is standing in front of them. Renee Caldwell stands in the center of the hangar, the silence of her crew feeling heavier than any noise she's ever heard in a boardroom. She slowly moves toward Mark. The anger is gone. The exhaustion has been replaced by a sharp, stinging clarity. She reaches out, and this time, she doesn't grab his collar. She offers her hand, palm up, a gesture of peace and deep, profound respect. I apologize, Mark, she says, her voice trembling as it echoes in the vast, metallic space. Publicly, to you and to your profession. My challenge was insulting, and I was wrong. I let the pressure cloud the only thing that matters, the truth. I let my ego gamble with lives. She turns to her entire team, to the engineers who laughed, to the board members who were ready to fire him, to the cameras that are still live streaming to the entire aviation industry. Mark Jensen just saved more than a deal today. He saved lives that I was willing to risk for a deadline. From this moment on, hangar protocol changes. Safety is not a suggestion, and no one, not even the CEO, is above the word of a man who knows the metal. Mark Jensen had seen the top of the mountain, and he had found it cold and lonely. He had realized that a man's worth wasn't measured in the height of his office, but in the safety of the people he carried. The engineers are silent, their heads bowed. The unidentified hero profile is suddenly opened on a junior technician's tablet. "Wait," the technician whispers, his voice rising in shock. "Look at the calibration code he just used. That's the Jensen standard. The 2014 protocol. That's him. The guy from the 2015 incident." The realization hits the room like a physical wave. Renee looks at Mark, her eyes wide, searching his face. You're the Mark Jensen? The one who designed the safety architecture for the entire 700 series? The one they called the father of reliability? Why are you here, working as a contractor?" Mark just shrugs, wiping a fresh patch of oil from his cheek with his sleeve. "Because the view from the ground is clearer than the view from the tower, Ms. Caldwell. And because my daughter needed a father more than the industry needed a consultant. The titles don't matter. The engines do. A machine doesn't care about your resume. It only cares if you fixed it right." The hangar culture shifts in a heartbeat. The mocking laughter is replaced by a profound, almost religious respect. The phones are lowered, and the videos are being deleted as the crew realizes they were filming a legend. Renee immediately orders the restoration of old calibration standards across her entire fleet. She realizes that in her quest for optimization, she had stripped away the very soul of the aircraft. She orders Marcus to be removed from the hangar, not for his mistake, but for his arrogance. Mark picks up his toolbox, ready to go. He doesn't want the fame. He doesn't want the spotlight. He doesn't want the board members to shake his hand. He only wants the silence of a job well done. Renee watches him walk away, realizing that true power doesn't come from a corner office. It comes from the man who isn't afraid to say no to a billionaire in front of the whole world. After the hangar clear and the jet has finally, safely, taken off for its meeting in Manhattan, Renee finds Mark in the quiet break room. He is packing his lunchbox, his daughter Lena sitting on a bench nearby, showing him a drawing of a plane with pink wings and magic engines. Renee approaches them, her voice soft. No longer the CEO, just a woman who has been humbled to her core. "Mark, I'm not here to justify what I did. There is no excuse for my behavior. I was a failure as a leader today, but I want to make it right. Not for the cameras, but for the company." She offers him a position, Chief Safety Supervisor for Caldwell Global. Not just for this hangar, but for every facility she owns across the globe. "You will have full veto power," she says, her eyes locked on his. "If you say a plane doesn't fly, it doesn't fly. No one, including me, can override your word. You are the final authority." She sees him look at Lena, who is watching them with curious, bright eyes. "And your schedule is your own," Renee adds quickly, her voice hushed. "You work when you want, as long as you keep us safe. You pick up your daughter every day. We need your eyes, not your overtime. We need someone who remembers why we build these things in the first place. We build them to bring people home." Mark looks at Lena, then back at Renee. He sees the sincerity in her eyes. He sees that the 5 minutes didn't just fix a faulty sensor, it fixed her perspective. He accepts the offer, not for the prestige or the massive salary, but because he knows that from now on, when he says safe, the world will actually listen. Renee looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the wreckage of a hero who had rebuilt himself out of grease and silence. She realized that honor isn't something you buy with a merger. It's something you earn in the 5 minutes when the world is watching you fail. Lena runs up and grabs her dad's hand, looking up at Renee. "Did you fix the big bird, Daddy?" she asks. Mark smiles, a real, warm smile that reaches his eyes, the first one Renee has seen. "Yeah, Lena, we made sure it could fly for real this time. We made sure everyone gets home." Renee watches them walk out of the hangar, hand in hand. She realizes that the greatest lesson of the day wasn't about mechanics. It was about boundaries and honor. You can own the hangar, you can own the planes, but you can never own a man's integrity. The hangar returns to its work, but the joke is never told again. Instead, they tell the story of the 5 minutes that taught a billionaire how to be a leader and a father how to be a legend. They tell the story of the man who chose the grease over the gold and ended up saving both. Renee stands in the quiet hangar, looking at the spot where Mark stood, and she takes a deep, clean breath for the first time in years. She knows that her own breathing is much lighter now. If you believe that respect is the foundation of every great decision, subscribe for more stories and leave a comment. In your opinion, what is the one boundary that should never be crossed at work?